Today we're going to talk about the symbolism of bridges. I did a video about doors before. I wasn't planning on doing a sequel, but a friend suggested bridges and I just happened to find myself thinking about them the other day. So, like before, I basically just scrolled through Google Images looking at photos or paintings of bridges, and I've tried my best to find information on the artists or the names of the bridges and locations and things, but Google doesn't always make it easy when you find the image from someone else who didn't credit it, or doing an image search sends you to a completely different bridge, but I've tried my best. The first obvious thing to say about bridges, I think, is that they are symbolically similar to doors in a lot of ways, largely the idea of change and transition. A bridge takes you to a new place, just as opening a door and entering a new room does. And I think there's endless examples in myths, like with gates, of bridges marking some form of transition, such as Charon's bridge over the River Styx. I think it's Charon. This picture here looks like the afterlife to me. This secluded little island with an orange glow through silhouetted trees. An island that would normally be beyond us, only here's this bridge to carry you across. I also think Bifrost or Bifrost in the Norse myths, the rainbow bridge connecting Urth or Midgard to Asgard, the home of the gods. This picture here reminds me of that, a stairway to heaven. I suppose just the idea there would be a physical bridge to connect Urth to the gods implies our own connection to them and the possibility of spiritual enlightenment. Both of these are forms of change though, sometimes much simpler transitions across bridges, many to a better place, meaning a sense of progression in our lives, such as a new job or a relationship or overcoming some specific difficulty, and many to a darker place. I think it's foolish the way we can tend to expect life to be like this unbending straight line up of progression, because it never is. Sometimes bridges like these ones aren't always the ones we have available. But I don't want to tread over the same ground I talked about in the doors video, so I'll point out a key difference between the idea of transition through a door and that of a bridge. A door is much more of an instant change. You have to find a way to unlock a door or defeat a gatekeeper or whatever, but once you walk through that door, you're into the different place, a different room. The transition is quick. Bridges are not so quick and suggest a more gradual, ongoing process of change. I think about the symbolism of doors and it feels more about choices to me. Which door do I pick? Which is the right one? It seems more to do with either making a decision or the door is something you earn after a decision has been made. You defeated the scary boss, therefore the door has unlocked and you can advance. And bridges, I suppose, can be about choice as well, if there are several bridges, but it's less common because they don't make as powerful a statement about choice, I don't think. You can't see through doors, therefore you can't foresee the consequences of your decision, whereas you can see across bridges, most of the time. The idea of mist or darkness over a bridge, I guess, would suggest the opposite, but the point is, bridges seem much less about decision making than the actual conviction to see that decision through to the end. You've decided to cross the bridge, sure, but when you start to get near the middle of the bridge, and if it's a rope bridge that sags at its deepest point and you can see a very deep chasm beneath you, can you keep going? Bridges most of the time tend to be straight as well, which adds to this idea of conviction, because all you've got to do is keep walking straight, no matter how scary or hopeless or often endless the bridge feels like it might be. The only thing you need to do is keep going, and eventually you'll complete this transition or change. I think bridges are much more terrifying than doors, maybe because I'm afraid of heights. They feel as though they're about conquering our own fear though, and particularly with the idea of mist or darkness over a bridge, much more than not being able to see where the bridge takes you, the greater fear is that how much further you may have to walk, if you will ever reach the end of it, and In that sense, the battle of crossing the bridge like this is to do with our ability to maintain hope in the face of hopelessness. Although sometimes maybe not even hope, but to just still keep going, whatever the motivation might be. Although actually the other fear as well is one you don't get with the solid, strong bridges made of stone and metal, but definitely with rope ones. Will it hold my weight when I step onto it? That's then about trust, I suppose, or putting faith in something when you cannot know the answer. Because those are two huge, mountainous challenges of fear in our lives. The fear to hope and the fear to trust. Anybody who doesn't struggle with them at times is a liar in my books. I think about this more slow transition of change though, and I find myself thinking about tunnels, which are very similar to bridges, maybe just inverted in the sense you go inside and through something in a tunnel rather than over it. It's the same in between space, however. But tunnels are more complicated in the sense they're not always straight. They might have bends, which means you can't see the light at the end whatsoever until you turn a corner. It also means you can get lost in a tunnel much easier, and that's actually quite fitting when you think about tunnels. They are very internal, this idea of going inside yourself, like entering a cocoon before breaking free as a butterfly later on. Going down into the shadow, Dante descending into hell, this internal, this dark, shadowy, lost path of the tunnel makes it feel much more like an unconscious form of change. Bridges, however, are high up over things, up in this more lofty plane of thought and the mind and a conscious form of change. That's what it feels like to me. Something more rational where you can make this linear, straightforward path that you can often see across. Again, I don't know about any of this. I've never studied art either. I'm just saying what I feel like looking at them. But bridges seem more like they tend to do with change of thought, whereas tunnels suggest a change of feeling. Although often I think the two are connected, bridges tend to have a dark underbelly where trolls lie before springing up and blocking your path, which is obviously very similar to a gatekeeper, and both suggest facing your demons. Probably more so the troll, because it's from directly below that it comes, underneath yourself, the you that's rooted below the ground. I like how these images show you it from the troll's perspective though. The troll here looks kind of lonely, I think, and the only light he gets directs his view straight towards the goat, as though this goat were his path towards the light. And this one here looks wary, like he's afraid of being attacked himself, and is keeping on guard, staring at us with his club raised. This one doesn't show its face, so I might be talking nonsense, but I get a sense of trepidation here, like bank robbers must feel before storming into a bank or whatever, that slight dread about what you're about to do. The knights look relaxed, where the troll grips the hammer tightly and seems on edge. The thing I was struck with the most when scrolling through Google Images at bridges was just how many of the paintings are all brightly coloured, cheery bridges. I had to specifically Google dark or scary bridges or something like that to find ones that weren't hopeful. But I think that suggests to us bridges do tend to carry a sense of hope much more with them. Perhaps that's because the transition feels a greater one than with doors in how long it takes to complete, or because you often can see where the bridge is heading, or maybe just it's travel in general. I think travel is often just feels like an optimistic thing within itself, either because you get to leave something bad behind because you know your destination and you know it will be good, or because you're moving. Bridges offer movement where we normally would have been impeded, and I just think having the power to walk, regardless of where you end up, is probably the most hopeful thing of all of it. And the second thing I was struck with is just how many of the bridges have a circular image to them somewhere. I think that's partly due to the fact an arch shape naturally gives a bridge a better structure, and so it then looks aesthetically pleasing to have this symmetry of this arch shape turning into a circle. But either way, what it gives us is then this sense of a cycle. And I don't think anything suggests change so clearly as a cycle does. Fulfilling change as well, not just moving to a different isolated space, but a completed whole cycle of development, which perhaps is also why they feel more hopeful than doors often can. The change here isn't just passing into another room before probably having to pick another door again, it's instead real change coming to its conclusion. You can look back across a bridge and see where you used to be and who you used to be and know who you are now. I wanted to talk about the symbolism of blowing up bridges in movies and stuff, and the idea of being stranded without a bridge and the importance of defending them, but possibly the most striking thing about bridges is the thing I probably should have started by talking about, which is the idea of joining two separate or sometimes opposed things together. We use the phrase building bridges to mean unity and burning bridges to mean disunity. There's a sense of duality. There are times in our lives where the world is very complex and we have to keep in mind both the good and the bad of things at the same time. We have to build a bridge between them. Most notably with life itself, not just saying it's a horrible, evil world full of cruelty, nor pretending the cruelty doesn't exist and saying it's all a wonderful place of rainbows. It's both, and somehow, as impossible as it seems, we have to find a way of processing both. I've always had an odd fascination with in-between spaces in general. Bridges, tunnels, halls, corridors, lobbies, because they are these interesting symbolic kind of either voids or places of harmony between other things. In fact, my research proposal as part of my course was into waiting rooms in counselling. What effect does having a waiting room have emotionally compared to not having one? What's the differences? What does it affect? You'd be surprised how little anyone seems to have researched that. Or maybe they have now, I don't know. But I think one of the things that interests me specifically about bridges is that whilst it does unite two different things, they don't merge into one. It's not stitching two things seamlessly together, because there's still this bridge between them. It's as much separating them as it is joining them, so that they can cross over and meet, but not lose all individualism either. I'm basically saying I made a video on the Lego Movie a while back, and I talked about the balance there between wanting to belong and wanting to be unique, and the bridge is that balance, really. I tend to think about multiculturalism in those terms, where I feel you want all these different cultures to be able to come together and accept each other in ways they often do, I think. But you also don't want anybody to lose touch with their roots and the cultures they came from. I suppose the UK is a great example of it as a whole. Several different countries that have maintained very distinct cultures, yet are also closely tied to each other. And I think even when certain people feel a lot of tension, or sometimes worse, about difference, the bridges do get built in the end without either side losing touch with its identity, particularly. Yeah, those are my thoughts on bridges. I hope you enjoyed me rambling about them. Let me know what you think about them. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you fancy more, support me on Patreon if you fancy even more, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And a special thank you goes to Devin, David Kling, Darren Burdock-Latter, Kestrel, Gay Hitler, Biden Walk the Streak, Samara Salsi, Sharakov2814 and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.